Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSPmagazine. You're listening to a new Redefining Security podcast. Have you ever thought that we are selling cybersecurity insincerely, buying it indiscriminately, and deploying it ineffectively? Perhaps we are. So let's look at how we can organize a successful InfoSec program that integrates people, process, technology, and culture to drive growth and protect business value. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
Marco,
Sean.
I pretend that I have friends sometimes.
Yeah. Are they virtual? Do you actually meet with them?
I get to meet with them virtually, and sometimes, I'm not going to go there. Anyway, I do have friends sometimes, and thankfully, they are friends that help us all protect ourselves in this crazy world of technology in some form or another, either by supporting businesses with inside businesses, helping them protect themselves, or advising organizations, helping the next generation be part of this crazy community we all call cybersecurity or InfoSec, or whatever we want to call it. And I think we're all a little crazy. I certainly am. I know you are, Marco.
I don't even know what I'm doing here, because they're like talking about cybersecurity expert, and then there's me, which I talk about other things.
Right.
But somehow I'm involved into this. I know every single person here that is on this gathering. And we were talking before start recording how we used to have this tradition to get a bunch of friends together, people being on the show or other hosts, and around the holiday, or sometimes being around St. Patrick, Halloween, we've done that, but lately we haven't done it. So we want to put together two things: to get together, finish the year, beginning the year, and that thing that everybody's asking us to do, prediction for the next year, which is kind of weird.
Exactly. Which we've had this conversation a couple of times with Matthew Rosenquist, and so we can kind of blame him for the topic, and we'll blame each other, Marco, for
don't make me go there.
wanting to bring our friends together. For those watching, you already know that there are a bunch of people joining us. If you're listening, you're probably like, "What the hell is Marco and Sean on about?" So we're gonna pass the mic to our guests today. We'll do a quick round of introductions so you know who's on. If you're listening, pay attention to the voice so you can hear them again and know who's saying what. And of course, watch the video so you can actually see our smiling faces. That, who knows, maybe there'll be tears when we figure out what's going to happen to us next year. Hopefully not. Anyway, I'll start with you, Kat. A few words about who you are.
Sure. My name is Kat Self. I work at the MITRE Foundation, which is an FRDC-funded nonprofit. And for those of you that are familiar with MITRE ATT&CK, I'm the macOS and Linux lead for those platforms for MITRE ATT&CK. And on the nice thing about MITRE is that you have two roles, or a couple of them. And then the other side of the house, I do adversary emulation engineering. And so recreating bad guys' malware so we can start defending against it.
Love it. Yolanda.
Hello, I'm Yolanda Reid. I'm glad to be back. I think I first start talking to you guys because I was a govy that liked to talk, and you weren't very familiar with that. But I'm not government anymore. I'm at IBM right now, working on a cybersecurity team, doing traditional cyber as well as consulting, and also looking at the microelectronics problem. How do we take care of the chips problem, and how do we do it securely? So I'm just having fun and enjoying where technology leads us.
Exactly. Yep. And I have to thank you. And I know we're okay dealing with the process of getting approval from government entities that folks can join us, but it's not always fun for the individual. And I know you had to jump through some hoops, and we appreciate you doing that so we can include government as part of our conversations, even though you're now private sector. But anyway, thanks for joining us, and you as well, Kat. Matthew.
Matthew Rosenquist. I'm a CISO cybersecurity advisor to businesses, governments, and academia around the world. I've been in this field for, I think this is my 35th year now. So I'm out there speaking, doing predictions, trying to fix what is broken. And my biggest interest is what's going to happen tomorrow. Yesterday is kind of boring because we suffer for it for today. But if we can see what's going to happen or have some understanding of what's going to happen tomorrow and the next day, it gives us an opportunity to get ahead in this game finally and try and get ahead of the attacks, be a little bit more efficient and effective. So that's what I'm here to do.
Perfect. Your 35 years explains my gray hair. Thanks for that. Good to have you here, of course, Matthew. I joke, of course. Laura.
Oh, hi. It's nice to meet new faces on this podcast, and thanks for having me back, Sean and Marco. I'm based up in Canada, and I work for a boutique firm called White Toque, and I've been spending the last 2-3 years consulting. Prior to that, I worked in large enterprise and did a whole bunch of things that gave me a lot of great background and experience. So almost 20 years. Matthew, I'm jealous that you still have as much hair, and it's all pretty, it looks really brown. After 35 years, I'm impressed. Anyway, it's a lot of fun. I keynoted at Sector this year as well, which was the instigator for Sean and Marco to have me on the podcast before.
Absolutely. This was the topic you presented on, so we're excited to have you on. And Rob.
Least I say about hair and colour and availability of hair, probably the better. Hi everyone, I'm Rob Black. I'm director of the UK Cyber 912 Strategy Challenge. I'm a lecturer in information activities where I help the British military think about integrating cyber into military operations. And I work with our Foreign Office, our State Department, thinking about what does acting responsibly in cyberspace mean with regards to how states should act, how other entities should act, and how do we encourage responsible behaviors. I probably do a few other things, but that's more than enough. Otherwise, I'll end up in trouble with lots more work than I need.
Right. How you keep up with it all. And we had the pleasure of meeting in London at InfoSec, Europe, which was a pleasure and a treat. So glad to have you on. Certainly.
Well, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, fun stuff. Last, certainly not least, Mr. Chuck Brooks. How are you?
Great, doing great. I'm Chuck Brooks. I'm a former Govy too, but a long time ago. And currently I run my own consulting firm and speak at numerous conferences where you often encounter Matthew, depending what country. And then I also teach at Georgetown University cybersecurity risk management program. And I teach a course called Disruptive Technologies and Organizational Management, which is a lot of fun, which goes into some of the topics of predictions. So I'm looking forward to the banter on this podcast and seeing a lot of good colleagues with it.
Very cool. Do I need to say who I am? I don't want to say who I am. I hope people on the show know who I am and how I do not belong here, but I am driven by a lot of curiosity. I have learned almost everything I know about cybersecurity by doing podcasts and talking with people way much more smarter and knowledgeable than me. So I'm here to really pick your brain with Sean and see what you think about the future. Which, of course, I want to just say this is it's cybersecurity, but we're not in a silos. I think almost everybody here will agree with me, and it affects society in every single aspect. So if I'm going to drop in there a couple of questions or comment about things that are not strictly cybersecurity, I think it will be a good conversation to have. So I think it's time for the tinfoil hat or the crystal ball. And Sean, let's get this party started.
I know. Is somebody burning to share? Well, let's set the stage. We're looking at 2024 and beyond. So anything that can happen in the next few years that we think will be beneficial to the role, beneficial to the program, beneficial to society, or the reverse, right? The dystopian view of where we might end up if we don't get things right. Anything's fair game here. So anybody have a burning idea that they want to share?
Well, you got to start with AI, right? I mean, that's the big issue on everyone's mind. It's going to take over the world.
He already went there. Can you believe it?
geez.
Can you believe this?
In the first minute, the first
That's
10
because
seconds.
he prompted his list of predictions, and that was the first thing that came up.
I was going to start off easy and be like, cyber's not going away in 24.
We heard that for a few years.
Pitch. What is that?
So when I was actually preparing for this interview, I was like, how can I answer these questions that they're going to ask me, right? Like, what's the psychic answer that, like, so that I'm smart and witty and everyone actually respects me, right? So I went to Perplexity and I typed in, what are the cybersecurity trends for 2024? And then
Hey, ChatGPT.
And I was like, well, what are the cybersecurity trends for 2023? And I'm like, there's no difference, guys.
I asked that
I bet
question.
nothing on either of those lists made you go, wow, I didn't think of that.
Well, I think in 2024, you'll see that every cybersecurity vendor has AI. And I think we're starting to see that already.
Yeah, it's required now, right?
Isn't that like 5 years now? They all had AI somewhere in there.
Yeah.
If it wasn't AI, it was machine learning or quantum ready. Or
You know what's funny? I asked that question, and the answer was me. That's what the ChatGPT said. Like, me.
Well, is this where we have to admit we actually filmed this in 2022 and we just changed the date for 2024 when we release it?
I think you have to agree that generative AI is sort of taking a leap just because everyone's using it now. And it's fun to do and create havoc. Unfortunately, a lot of the bad guys are using it too, but it is transformative. It's a question of, it's not magical. It's just, databases and synthesizing data, but, it's a real factor now. So I think we're going to see more and more of that.
Yeah. Well, I think go ahead, Yolanda.
Yeah, I said I think it's interesting that we talked about business, but it affects education. You're a teacher, a professor, and now it's like we're raising kids that have it on their phones, the free version at least, and writing papers or doing resumes or doing interviews or proposals, all that people are using. So I think it is changing how we interact. And then also, do we trust it? Do we cite it? I mean, there's a lot of those questions that we're going to have to answer starting in 24 because we haven't solved them in 23. So we got to push it to 24.
Yeah, well, I'm excited about it. And kind of to build on what Chuck was saying, it is relevant. And because everybody's adopting it, people see dollar signs, which means there's a huge influx of investment and now innovation. So whenever you have all that money and interest, it just moves at breakneck speed. And at least from a cybersecurity perspective, right, we're responsive. When bad things happen, then we get invoked. If bad things are happening, why would you spend money on security? So you now have this rapid adoption and innovation cycle that's using AI, specifically generative AI. And I think we're going to see all sorts of bad uses for it, as well as many, many good uses for it. But this next year, I think, probably will be the sharpest incline, right? The highest rate of increase adoption and crazy things that we couldn't even think of coming into play that we have to adapt to.
Does anybody know? Marco, is this on? Maybe Rob, you have this perspective. Will this be successful and widely adopted because of public data it's been trained on, or will we see private data sets being used to change the way we've done things in the past, be it for business, be it for security programs, be it for how we audit and monitor and ensure compliance? Rob, what do you think?
I guess the answer is hopefully both, if they're going to take the technology accurately. I guess for me, the really interesting thing, whether it's 2024, this brings Marco's perspective in. I think AI is going to lead to a real shift in society, just in terms of how relationships are created. And I remember when we chatted in our podcast, we talked about, I don't think it's the AI killer robots I'm worried about. It's the AI sex robots that scare me, Because I could see the collapse of society with the reproduction rate dropping off because people make friends with AI robots. Why wouldn't you pick a more attractive, more intelligent, more EI character than your partner who snores, never does the washing, never buys you the Christmas present you want? You know, in society, you're going to pick the AI option every time, and that is across the board.
I think that's already happening in Japan. At least I was reading an article saying that it's a real problem. People are so enveloped in their gaming and their digital lives that there's not much socialization. And, of course, the birth rate marriages are dropping off.
What's the definition of socialization? Because I've seen there was a segment here in New York where I think it was New York State is buying AI-enabled assistants to give companionship to elderly citizens that don't have family anymore. So that's a connection, right? That maybe helps them feel better and live longer. I don't know.
I don't think it takes long before it filters across and into other pockets of communities where, we already talked about the loneliness epidemic as it is already. Now I throw in AI characters, personas who can deliver everything you need. Why would you need to reconnect with the rest of humanity? I think it's a serious consideration that we need to work out how we manage that.
Yeah, I think we need to look at social media now. Yeah. I would say with social media.
I always like to bring the joy and the cheer to a Christmas party, but there we go. I'll start with that one. So,
count on you, Rob.
I don't know about you, but I like when Alexa tells me good night. Good night.
Wait, hold on. You're a security professional and you have Alexa listening into your conversations at home?
I tell people,
turn that cybersecurity card in. You don't get to hold that anymore. No.
I tell people you got to be smart where you put it, right? It cannot be everywhere, but they're, in my kitchen, I don't care if she hears how many eggs I put in my recipe.
So it's in your bedroom, though, is what you just said. Good night, Yolanda. I'm tracking your heart rate right now. You're breathing. And how many people have been in and out of your room? Yes.
To Rob's point, I actually think there's something to be said for the communities around any technology. Like right now, for example, if you actually look at all of the black markets and malware as a service and ransomware, I mean, all of those usually come from really unstable environments. To give you an example, actually, there was a developer for TrickBot. And the only reason why she started developing for TrickBot was because she couldn't find an actual programming job in our country. Mm-hmm. So it's like, it's always going to come back to the community that if people actually have decent jobs that pay them living wages, like there's not as much motivation to potentially go to jail for other work, right?
Well, be careful though, right? We've got very affluent communities and there's lots of studies on just criminals. Don't even think about cyber criminals and the greed factor. Right. It's simply easier, right? I want to live way above my means. Sure, I could get a job, but I could make millions doing something else. So, it's not necessarily just that. Yes, I agree with you. There are some aspects if you can't find a job, if you're desperate. We see that especially in impoverished nations that are just coming online, right? Most people in this world earn less than $20 a day. So when you get an environment like that and you put them online and, they have a choice, earn less than $20 a day or go into cybercrime and you may earn 5 times that amount. Well, they need to literally put food on the table, right? Afford education for their children, basic education. Yeah, it's going to seem pretty attractive. But we also have organized cyber criminals out there that are doing it because they're greedy. And they're going to keep doing it. A greed principle says if they can steal $10 from you today, they're going to come after for $20 from you tomorrow. So I think there's more aspects than just.
In addition, I think you get organized crime jumping into digital because it's much easier, less risk, and they can hide easier, particularly when they're in countries that won't prosecute them. So you're seeing
and transfer money easier too, right? It all becomes digital. Yeah,
there's different risks that come with it too, though. Like I think if you're looking at those who are motivated by the greed and the ability to say like climb a ladder, and you end up sort of amassing some sort of large group of people to actually be in the super rich echelons of criminal organizations, right? You have a lot of people and a lot of resources that are reporting into you. But cyber has also made it much more difficult to have a handle on that army that you've put together, right? It's not like, the old days of the mob bosses and, if Johnny gets out of line, somebody goes and breaks his legs. If Johnny's over on the other side of the world and he decides he doesn't like working for you anymore and he wants to work for somebody else, Johnny's gone.
I think there's an important point that's in Kat's message, though, and that's a lot of these criminal gangs, the mob, they're funded. Somebody who's already affluent has the means to do certain things. Somebody who lives in a place that doesn't have the means, doesn't have the support structure, doesn't have an organization they can turn to, now can, with the democratization of technology, democratization of AI, can do these things without much investment. It's a bit of time online to learn. The tools are there. The rewards are great. Being in a place where eyes aren't following and laws don't follow either. It's fairly safe, right? So why not do these things? I think technology has enabled a lot of things to happen that maybe weren't possible before, of course.
Are you advocating to be a cyber criminal? Because that sounded a lot like an advertisement.
Very much a sales pitch, wasn't it?
Ransomware is a service, free to start, make millions. Brought to you by Sean and Marco.
The messenger. I'm just the news.
Well, isn't that though the parallel economy that we're discussing here? Like, the organized crime, as Chuck said, they're of course going to jump on that. They jump on waste management. They jump on other things before. So if there is a way to work on this, and again, I think we go back to society hasn't changed. The technology that allows certain things and the way that we do things, including cybercrime, has changed. So that's a lot to think about. What can we do to make it more competitive, to make the people come on the good side? I'm assuming we're all on the good side here. Right?
One other element you have to look at now is the geopolitical change. A lot of these state actors, especially North Korea, Iran, China, Russia, are using this as an instrument of power, going after infrastructure globally around the world without really having any consequences. And I think you're seeing more and more of that because it is a weapon, and that is exceptionally dangerous.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big things. And Chuck, I know you and I have been talking about this for years, this ramp up, and it's going to get much, much worse with the amount of money that they're pouring into. I just did a keynote in Helsinki, or not in Helsinki, it was in Montreal, about how these aggressive nation states, the four you mentioned particularly, were going after critical infrastructures of countries. And we're seeing that now, right? Look at the healthcare, look at the finance, look, there's all sorts of things that, water treatment plants, all sorts of things. And that's just going to increase. Next year, it's going to be twice as bad as it was in 2023, I think.
But I think what's been really interesting is, after you, Yolanda, sorry.
I was going to say, we just had that repeat of water, last week, where nation states got into our water system. But thankfully, there was monitoring. So we learned something from a year ago.
But I think what's really interesting for me is I think the change in 2024, I think we can all agree that the threats are going to increase. And, as democratization of technology enables that, and as the geopolitics gets woven in, I think the real significant so what for 2024 is that this is landing on the CISO's desk much more than it has been in the past. In the past, the CISO was bounded by, this is my problem space, this is my digital domain, and I'm going to stop every bad guy getting in or do my best to. Now the CISO has to be aware of geopolitical trends. They have to be aware of what's happening in this part of the world because they know that might lead to some disruption on their network, no matter where they are in the world. So I think the remit in 2024 of the CISO's responsibility is going to shift again and only increasingly expand. And we're seeing different types of attacks which almost fall outside the scope of the CISO in the traditional mindset. I'm thinking some of the botnet attacks, the sniping attacks, the abuse of the large-scale abuse of APIs, which are large botnets taking advantage of systems in place which aren't being abused in terms of being attacked and broken into, but are being abused in terms of the terms of service. And most of the times, I think that's falling outside the scope of the CISO because the network's working, everything's running properly. But now we're seeing retail organizations saying this is having a massive impact on our business. We need to do something about it. Oh, who's the person to do something about it? Well, CISO, you do tech, you solve it. And CISO, you need to know what's going on over here. Look, bring it in. You need to bring that. Look at threat intelligence. You're getting CISOs now looking at geopolitical analysts. Bring them in, either paying for it externally or bringing in resources and trying to persuade the board that they need those resources. And I think that, to me, is going to be the shift in 2024, is having a much more holistic approach to cybersecurity at the board level conversation. It could be a great way of CISO getting authorization for extra funding, extra resource. Fingers crossed, because they could be able to talk about it in the board language a lot more clearly.
Unfortunately, CISOs
are everybody else stops. Go for it.
I was going to say, I kind of agree with Rob, because we did have the court case this year about the CISO, and I could see the CISO's role being redefined, especially how it ends. We're still kind of waiting for what is the CISO going to be really responsible for, and what do they have to pay attention to, what do they have to report, and what, there's a lot that's going to come out of that. And so I could see 2024, we redefine the role of the CISO and also redefine what resources they need.
The stop of the CISO.
The CISO role has always evolved, right? And it will continue to evolve as new technology and new regulations and everything come into play. So anybody who thinks it's a static definition has already lost. We have to adapt at the same rate as the attackers and the environment in which we protect. So, and we had two cases, right? We had the SolarWinds case, but we also had the Uber case this year where there was a final judgment. And both of those are defining and creating a lot of unnecessary fear among the community. But again, mostly who think that, hey, this is my box, this is what I'm going to play in. And part of that is because you're just so busy and I can only do this much. So, I mean, we will continue to grow. As a security leadership community, we have to.
And I also think that some places they had IT fulfill those CISO roles, and I think that people are starting to see that it's different. IT and cyber is different. You need different people. So.
You need the soft skills from CISO too, as well as the technical skills. And a lot of IT people just don't have those soft skills.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I want to go with this, because, I mean, let's be honest. The CISO has the big picture, but only driven by the data that their team is providing them, the data that the team or that the community is providing them in the form of threat intelligence or information sharing groups, ISACs and whatnot. And all of that only matters if you have a view into what actually is happening, what's taking place. So Kat, I actually want to go to you, because with the emulation work that you do, simulation work that you do you see a shift or a direction that things are headed this coming year that might catch people off guard? Do you see any trends or anomalies that say, the way we're managing programs today, we might want to rethink that?
I think the biggest trend I've seen is with increased visibility, everyone has increased emergencies and misassociates everything. And I think the biggest, I'm a specialist on Mac OS and Linux platforms, right? And it's been brutal to get visibility on Linux platforms and reporting, straight up inside of reverse analyst, reverse, and now I'm don't use acronyms, Kat. A reverse analyst report. They'll literally be well, we found the Linux software on one of our servers, but we're going to reverse and describe the Windows version of the same malware. And you're are you kidding me right now? I can't put that in attack for Linux. That doesn't help me. And I would say, this is not probably okay to recordings. With all of
we won't tell anybody. It's okay.
It's not public.
It's our little secret.
With all of the nation states kind of showing their goods with Ukraine, with all of the activities that are going on and that are now getting a lot of reporting that are getting pushed publicly so we can start having our partners be able to read up on this. A lot of that's been really good for cybersecurity professionals, because now we have things that we can now defend against, because now there's visibility on that. And I think that's just going to increase over the next year, specifically for like IoT and Linux and Mac OS, which are three, I think, underrepresented platforms, and how they're actually being leveraged, like the networking, the routers. Like, I'm really excited for the visibility of that telemetry to come out so we can start truly defending against it.
Does truly defending also mean offensive capability? Do we need to up that capability and consider it more often now that we're dealing with state sponsors?
So can I jump in? I think before we worry about offensive, there's so much more we can be doing, being much more proactive. So not necessarily tipping the balance into the offensive space. I think we can just really up our game in the defense of our networks. And Sean and Mark, I know this is what we were talking about, but the use of deception aggressively to shape their behavior, rather than just using deception for threat intelligence, gathering knowledge about the bad guys, making them question everything about our network, making them question if what they've accessed is actually useful information, making them question their own tools, really messing with their heads. And I think for me, that's what we're also seeing. As we talk about more enhanced complex threats, we're seeing the intent side of the threat actors. We're not just looking at threat actors in terms of their TTPs. We're looking at how they're making decisions, and we're beginning to exploit that. And for me, I think we're going to push more into that space, possibly not in 2024. I'd love it to be 2024, but I think it's going to be 25, 26, when we're going to start seeing burnable, deployable deception capabilities going into our networks by us to mess with the heads of the attackers. Because at that point, they can't trust what they're getting. And that means we're taking advantage again.
Are we stuck with, Kat, to your point, Linux and Mac, not the standard managed OS and device in most organizations, traditional corporations? One of the things I was thinking about is rail and transportation, airways, sea, those types of things. And certainly you mentioned water, Yolanda. I'm halfway through a movie where the electrical grid gets popped, which is not a far-fetched scenario either. But these are using systems and devices and sensors and controllers and all kinds of things that aren't Windows and Mac and Linux.
OT networks, yeah.
Yes.
Right?
OT networks.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, do we get a handle on any of that in 24? I think we're still flying by the seat of our pants in those worlds, right? And forget about space.
I think
it'd be nice if they had pants on, I think. They'd be less vulnerable if they wore, some sort of protection.
I think some places in some cities are actually doing a really good job. It's really, do we take the time to invest in it? And I think that as citizens, we can request that, right? So I used to give this example of like the electric grid. I would drive by a power station, the gate would be open. Like, why is that gate open? That's something that we can request. Like, can you at least close your gate? Don't let it be free to the rest of the world. So that gate's not open now, of course, but I think that we can work with the places that aren't as secure. I think we can do that as citizens of our own community.
Well, I predict we have the Brady Bunch right now. And a cat walking through. Sorry.
Yes.
OT networks are hugely complex, right? And the problem is they live a lot longer than our IT counterparts. So when you buy something, a switching pump, you expect it to be in there for 10 to 30 years. Now, you don't expect a Windows laptop or machine or server to last even a fraction of that. Right. And so you've got a lot of legacy in the OT environments. And when you're talking about RTOS runtime operating systems, these are often very custom, dedicated to the hardware and configuration of the system. Very difficult to attack. But once you attack it, once you figure out that solution, it's reproducible. So there is a whole different level of complexity when you talk about OT cybersecurity and networks in addition, because they're all connected to IT networks as well, in addition to the IT network. So it's an entirely different conversation. And if somebody has opened an external security gate, that's the last of your worries, to be honest. You need to worry about somebody opening a chemical valve, somebody going in and tampering with the water supply or configurations of chlorine in there, right? Or, I used to work at Intel, these massive factories, 5 times as big as a, stadium. It's basically a chemical plant, right? Creating computer chips. Well, if you mismanage those chemicals, really bad things happen to 20 block radiuses. So it's not necessarily the security gate on the outside that we should be worried about. It's the health and safety issues that really become profound with.
So I say that, I say the security gate for the fact that anyone can walk in and not all the systems are password protected and things like that. So you can walk in and do some damage, right? So I think that the community can help put attention to some of these things. And some cities are doing it better than others.
So speaking of 20 block radius being damaged, George Platsis has joined us.
What an introduction.
Wow.
Hi, George. Good to see you.
Welcome.
Well,
how do you feel?
Push it, call it a 5 block radius. So clearly my contribution is making this a 3x3 square because you
That's
guys
right.
Right now.
I feel symmetrical now. I appreciate that.
I brought the symmetry here to it. So thank you all and apologies for the delay. Sean, I don't know if there's a question there. If you just want me to pick up in the middle of usual, like coming into a DJ set and just like a transfer.
Yeah,
so what do you want?
Play something.
Pick up the spin. Start with the read the label on the center of the wax, if you would.
No, we use white labels. That's where I came from. We didn't know what you were playing.
Just throw it on, hope for the best. All right. Well, let's follow that too. Who do we get today?
Yeah.
Of just who you are and what you're up to, George. So folks.
Well, thank you, Sean. Name is George Platsis. I've focused most of my life these days in cybersecurity, in private consulting right now. My background is interdisciplinary. Started really much as an entrepreneur and then kind of started going down these rabbit holes through the business continuity space, specifically through disaster and emergency management. So kind of bringing this all together, as Matt's saying, you got their technology and then you got your blast radiuses. So there's a lot of work in there. There was working in different parts of the world, but we're well into this. So people don't want to hear about me. They want to hear our insights. So let's go into that and people can check out the bios after.
Yeah, very good. Do you have anything burning in your mind from...
Well, I'm going to say from the tail end, and apologies if this sounds out of junk from what Matt was saying, these threats that we're going to face, that we have been facing, really are of a hybrid nature. And you cannot look at them in silos. I'm going to go back to the disaster emergency management training that I had. It's one of the greatest challenges in thwarting these threats is everyone's kind of focused in their own little discipline. And I can tell you, when I was doing the business continuity work about 15 years ago, like really I was looking at like what's best practice. And I think we can apply this to like cybersecurity right now. And there was a lot of pushback on the best practice because it's like, well, this is too big of an issue. You really want to focus on this area of business continuity. And therein, I think, lies the problem, that if you're just looking at one sliver of the problem, if you're looking at a goal as opposed to the entirety of the system, you're going to miss this. So, Matt, to your point, you could be really focusing on these OT, IT spaces, but what are you doing about the insider? What are you doing about, I think, Yolanda, you were mentioning this, sorry for miscarrying, someone that just walks into there, but also has not only the knowledge from a technical side, but what that entire system can do. Like you're walking into a chemical plant. So how do you get through this? You do need some of these multi-stakeholder discussions. You don't want to go overboard because then it just turns into a committee that gets nothing done. But stop looking at these issues in isolation and realize there are not only first and second degree consequences, it's those third, fourth, and fifth degree consequences that I think we're missing because people aren't really sitting down and planning out what could happen. How's that for an intro? Did I do at least 10 miles of a blast?
So George, I mean, I'm always cognizant of the insider. That's actually where I started my career, is going after the insider. So they have a special place in my heart. But I do hear people, be concerned. Oh, well, we're worried about the insiders to do all these complex hacking. And honestly, I think it's a red herring, right? If it's an insider, they have trust to begin with. They don't have to do complex hacking.
Correct.
Right? They can do simple social engineering or just use the credentials that they were
pull
given.
The plug.
Yeah, it's the path of least resistance. Rarely do we have an insider go out and actually create technical exploits and deploy them. And usually in those cases, it's because a nation state is backing them, and there's other, wheels turning.
Someone's giving them the USB key.
That's right. I need to plug this in. Right?
That is the nature of their issue right there. Someone else is giving them the technical link.
Yes.
And they know where to insert that into the system.
But those are the rare cases, right? If you want to take down, a nuclear spinning centrifuges in a nuclear production facility, right? Very rare. Most of the insiders, they tend to be doing it either because they're mad at their boss or their company, right? Or they're greedy. They want to steal something. It's really a case of embezzlement.
Matt, do you know the acronym MICE? MICE. Money, ideology, compromise, ego.
The primary methods or reasonings behind threat actors' motivation. Yes. So if you're interested, go take a look at the TARA methodology, Threat Agent Risk Assessment, where we use the threat agent library that was developed years ago that looks at the methodology and archetypes of different cyber attackers. So yes, very, very similar to that.
I think I agree a lot with what George was saying. Is I think there's a lot of times when we get too focused and I will say, so a lot of the demographic of companies that I'm working with, which are small, medium enterprise, they hear a lot about the threats that are coming out and everything. I said, there's nothing new about that group that hasn't already been done by 6 other groups. And you still don't have multi-factor authentication on your email, on the internet. Like, stop caring about that stuff, right? Like the news and the noise. If it's something interesting to me, it's because I'm seeing something there that I haven't seen before that we're not already supposed to be defending against. Those are the ones I care about. But otherwise, I think, like a good security program that has a decent number of layers in the places where the most common attacks occur is still not in reach of a lot of organizations. They, not because they can't, but because they haven't pursued it, right? And I would just love to get people to that hump. And I love working with clients who know that they need to get there and they want to get there. They just don't know how. And I wish there were 10 times as many organizations that were at least in that mindset, because we'd be a lot further along. But, and then like tying into that insider threat, I think a lot of the things that we put in place that are mainly, if you think about them from like an inside control, things that help people from making mistakes. DLP I think is especially in this category, but other, like anti-malware and things like that, right? Like I clicked on the thing, crap, I didn't mean to, right? Like that's 90% of it. I sent the thing to the wrong person. Now I've leaked data. So many of those controls that we put in place actually help our insider threat program, because when you see people trying to do weird things that are trying to bypass the controls that help them not do bad things, then you've got detectable signals that they're up to something. But anyway, that's my little rant on just get the basics out of the way, please.
Yeah, for criminal hackers, it still comes down to what's the easiest, and it still is phishing.
Yes.
I mean, it hasn't changed for the last decade.
Yeah.
And cyber hygiene is still, it's still poor on most companies. So they don't have to go to a lot of elaborate activities to breach. Often they could just send an automated phishing attack and get in.
Wetware attacks are so much easier than hardware or software attacks.
Yeah, this sounds like yesterday's stuff to me. I want to get a little wacky.
Okay, so Sean,
well, now we're gonna have AI do it for us. There we go. Now
yeah, we're gonna have AI,
right? Exactly. AI taking care of all the basic.
So if we look to 2024.
Sorry,
I think one of the terms I was going to offer was, if we are going to look to 2024, even though it might feel like we're going back in time in a little bit, it feels wrong of me not to mention the word election. And I think there's going to be some interesting activities around elections that we might need to be cognizant of. And I don't think it's necessary in the traditional disruption of voting machines or anything like that. It's going to be in the information space, and seeing increased activities around that space, and seeing how organizations respond. Threat actors taking advantage of political processes to aim to protect the election process, actually being exploited with information gaps, information noise blocks. And I think we're going to have an interesting year with elections in the UK. I think a certain other nation might be having an election, and God knows who's going to be running for that. But I think there'll be a few interesting conversations from an information security in the broadest sense perspective around it as well.
Rob, I want to tie something in that you just said right there, and with Chuck, and to put my brother Chuck on the spot, since we've been doing this together for a while, for many years. I think, Chuck, both you and I have seen, and I'm going to be presumptuous and say many on this call, we have been talking about the same basic issues for probably about a decade, if not longer. So we are still failing at the basics. There's this, I think one of the biggest disservices, I've said this before in the past about the cybersecurity industry, is that early in its inception, it became mystified. And because it was mystified, everyone thinks it's big and ooh and scary. It's like, no, there are basics that need to be addressed, and we have not addressed those basics. And that's why we keep on coming back and back to this. Now I'm going to pile on to what you were saying, Rob, which I agree, the information space is going to be an issue from 2024 onwards. We have these foundational basic issues that we have not addressed. Now pile on a whole bunch of information that we cannot rely on. And it's not because it's necessarily the truth or a lie or partially. It's just there's so much noise that it's into an overload phase. So take a rocky foundation and pile on a whole bunch of noise. I think that's what we're going to see for the immediate future. And a potential fear of mine is that we're going to outsource the trust that we have. Like, we're going to say, well, we're going to get an AI to look into this. Well, why should we trust the AI? I still think this is the best computer and the best filter we have. But the minute we start outsourcing that trust to somewhere else, I think it's just going to be more noise upon more noise. And it's just at some point, it's going to collapse in on itself. A few years back, and I'll finish with this, I think when people were talking about all the different strategies and the layers that you could add on there, my biggest concern was, can you trust the data that you are looking at, for malicious or non-malicious, or can you trust it? And I think we're getting to that point where it's like, even from non-malicious, it's like, can you trust it? So use this. This is still the best computer. I'm still of the mind of that.
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
You want to go ahead, Yolanda?
I was going to say, the trust word was going through my head, probably last 10 minutes. And that's going to be something people don't want technology because they don't trust it. But then we need the technology, but we still don't trust it. And so how do we get to a point that we can actually trust the technology, and the technology is moving pretty rapidly out there? It is a hard problem. And you're correct. We've had this problem forever. And I used to call it a bowl of spaghetti. We had something, and then we just patch and we patch and we patch on top. And it's all of these little things all over the place. And we still have it. And so how do we get to trust?
I advocate that on occasion. Less is more. Like, you know what? Yeah. Get rid of the spaghetti and get some different type of macaroni product that's easier.
Yes.
If we want to secure elections, let's just go back to paper ballots and forget the digital and have them. I think that's always been reliable. No mail in, just go and vote unless you have an absentee ballot, and have one paper ballot. Otherwise, there's always going to be a mistrust by one side.
I want two ballots. Check.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be much more into the space beyond the paper ballot. I think that's what's really interesting. Seeing what happened with the Macron election in France, and seeing how they had the dumping or hack and dump activities. We're going to see so much more mischievous activity that even if it is just a paper ballot, I don't have the confidence in the people knowing that they're ticking the right line in the ballot. That's the challenge for me.
Yeah, the butterfly ballot, and
should
yes.
they be voting if they don't know how to get in the right line anyway?
What
So
are you
Sean,
going to say on trust, Kat? I'm interested.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I'll take the opposition point here. I'm actually less worried. There has been so much fear and concern and so much focus and litigation that I think moving forward in the 2024 elections, there is going to be an overabundance, right? Just because they predict there's going to be all sorts of lawsuits and issues and bad people are going to try and do things. It's in times like that where security is actually best because you're on your highest alert, you're preparing for litigation, right? And you're putting your foot forward, and there's justification to be able to spend the money on security. So when you have those kinds of combinations and you have that awareness, you tend to be most secure. So I'm actually less worried about it. Beyond the normal things, I don't know where I'm going to stand in line or things like that. I mean, that's always been a problem. If we want to get back to it, fine. Let's cast ballots like the Spartans did with colored stones. Sure. But that's one of the areas that I'm actually less worried about in 2024 elections.
so to follow up, Sean, what we should actually focus on for 2024, I think 100% it's going to be a shifting of reputation, but not reputation based on marketing, because of the amount of, just to like Rob and everyone else's point, the amount of disinformation that's gone into Facebook events and all of like news, everything, even our non-traditional ways to consume data and news events that are even happening right now. Like there's a ton of disinformation, and it's almost at the point where now I've even watched myself, and I could see this for everybody else, where you're like, well, what company do I know actually cares about privacy? I'm just going to go with them. Well, what company do I know that actually does their due diligence and does third-party vendor management, or they do open source review before they adopt the tool into their networks? So I feel like now we're actually going to be moving into where it's actually a managing of trust and less so about all of the technology requirements of AI. To your point, we kind of can trust it, and it's been verified.
Yeah, actually, I wrote myself and AI wrote an article about the collective, where we all have a role to play. Now, I put it out in 2050, probably too far. I think it happens sooner. I don't know if it happens in 2024, but I think we all have a role to play in validating who we are, what we're saying, what our systems generate, how decisions are made, what attacks are taking place. I think somehow we as individuals come together in some way, leveraging this data and this technology to help each other combat or protect ourselves from each other. So I think it all starts with trust, but I think we have to, it's going to take more than a single entity. It's going to take all of us, right? I think that's my perspective anyway.
I think that
we have a whole generation now that's getting their news on TikTok. How are we going to stop that? I mean, they trust TikTok. They don't, and that is just, no wonder they have crazy views and love Bin Laden. I mean, it's just nuts.
As long as they can vote on the ballot paper, they're fine.
Maybe it's not about stopping it, and maybe it's about, seeing it and witnessing it and hearing it with your own eyes. It's like having that critical thought about it. It's like, if I do see something, should I take that at face value or should I question it? I'm going to go back to my academic days. And one of the best professors I ever had a rule, said, I'm going to paraphrase here, I'm not going to get exactly, but it was, take everything I say to be a lie. And he was really one of the best professors, because it was like, challenge what I tell you. Do not take what I'm telling you as the authority, as the professor, as truth. Go out there and find out if this is real. I think if we can instill that sort of discipline, and I'm sure we all do that in our daily lives. It's like, we seek out, is this real? And again, going back to the best computer we have, trusting this.
Well, the real failure. Go ahead.
I think that's a double-edged sword. And I'm going to put out there, critical thinking skill, absolutely, 100%. but it needs to be balanced with trust, because I think the other thing we've seen is a huge amount of erosion in trust in institutions and large organizations, and some of it very rightly deserved for that trust to be eroded. But the flip side is, if we question absolutely everything, if we assume that we are to be the expert to know whether the people who are in charge of X really know what they're doing, and then instead of looking at what we're capable of because we can't boil the ocean, right? We got to put some trust out there somewhere, right? So then we go and find like these pockets of people who are telling us about how we can't trust this. And this is a big problem with the misinformation, right? It's not like people just flip a switch and they're one day like way out in left field and have lost all touch with reality. It steps down these paths and their trust is misplaced. And I think that's a huge issue too, right? The critical thinking is the one piece. We got to know how to ask the questions, but we also have to know how to find reliable sources for answers. And I think that's a huge piece. I mean, people are great at asking questions. We have a whole lot of Hollywood that teaches us how to ask questions and be a renegade. And like, if you look at all the superhero movies now, practically, they're all like Lone Rangers who like they're beating the system, right? But we got to, like, the systems aren't all broken. Some of them do work. In fact, many of them
it's
kind of 80% work.
It's a hard question to know where to trust, right? Before we had the, Chat GPT blow everything up and change our worlds, people used to ask, where can I get trusted information, right? Like news stations, they're owned by private companies and, that have their own agendas. And so where can I get trusted information when it's happening? And it's a hard question to answer. I used to say, well, if it has an AP on it, right, then it was, looked at by peers and then it got a registration number, but that could be hacked and modified and all of those things. So it is a problem. How can you get trusted information and know that it's the truth?
Well, George kind of said that when a professor that knows his things is going to tell you, take what I say, but also go inform yourself somewhere else. So you can't just choose something, because even the most trusted news is still going to come with biases. Mm-hmm. So from where I come from, political science and mass media before the internet, so I've been there a little bit, you can tell from my beard, it was like you read 3 newspapers, one from the left, one from the right, one from the middle. It's a lot of job. It's a lot of work, and people don't want to do it. They want somebody that says, this is what it is. So it's great that we pick the most trusted source, but maybe there isn't a necessarily 100% trusted source. So, I thought it was going to be a jolly get together, but with cybersecurity people, this is cannot be.
What a downer!
I'm going to throw another wacky.
Here, man. I thought we were talking about cybersecurity. I blame Chuck. There, I'm pointing at that.
Blame Chuck.
How about some good news, Sean? Good news. Let's end with good news.
We'll end with good news, but I'm going to have a quick chat
I'm going to start on the good news on the cybersecurity side, since Marco said. I think that we're going to see this continued cross-pollination of security and privacy go a little bit more mainstream. And because of that, I think you're going to see, number one, people more concerned with privacy, and in turn, see that sort of investment into security. The driving factor may be that there's more regulation, that there's more fine, there's more fear of consequence. But I think if we start to see those two windows or two circles kind of overlap, I think that's going to be some good news for the cybersecurity and the data privacy spaces.
Yeah, and I would tack on ethics to that as well. Yeah. So you've got digital ethics and AI. We get back to AI again. That has really kind of spurred a lot of the ethical discussions, which I think is great. But yeah, I think in 2024, I would actually say the regulations that are coming into effect are probably going to have some of the biggest positive outcomes. Now, people are worried, right? Organizations are worried I have to follow these things. How the heck am I going to do it? but it's going to force them to get to another level of effectiveness and efficiency. And so when you look at the SEC ruling, hey, if you have a material breach, you have to report it in 4 days instead of 4 months or 4 years, right? You've got something similar on the EU side. We've got AI, right? AI regulations in Europe and EU just got passed. This is going to force organizations to step up, be more transparent to the benefit of their shareholders. And I think that's going to trickle down even into the private sector. So this is a forcing function that basically was, hey, industry, you couldn't self-regulate yourself and you were doing really bad things and trying to hide even worse things. Now we're going to hit you with regulations. And I think the covers are going to get pulled back and there's going to be a lot of cockroaches and rats scurrying for cover, which sucks, but it's also really healthy long-term for our industry. 2024 is where that starts. Look for the cockroaches, baby.
Wearing pants. I don't know. Yolanda, some good news.
And from that, I think we'll see a lot of public-private cooperation at a new level. Exactly from what you're saying, because they have to. The private sector has to. And I think one of the areas will be we didn't touch on, but you mentioned with space. I think that we've neglected it as a critical infrastructure, and I think after the Russian hacking of the Ukrainian Viasat satellite, there'll be much more attention paid to the communications and sensing that is up there that's determining everything we do, and we're going to look to fortify that space world in the next year.
Nice one. Yolanda, some good news?
I guess to echo what Matthew was saying, I'm excited by the transparency that will be coming out in 24. And so, things were being done and we didn't know how it was being done. So to be able to have insight into what's being done and to influence, to be able to say that's wrong, this is right, this needs to be adjusted, where we never had that insight before. It's going to be better overall for all of us. And I'm also looking forward to technology and humans partnering, right? And so I will say I'm going to jump on that bandwagon and get the EV with the technology out there to test it all out. And how are we going to partner on these roads together? And I see that coming, right? People are scared of technology taking over, but I think that technology and humans should be partners. And so I'm advocating and looking forward to that.
Rob, good news?
You got none.
I'm not sure if it's I'm not sure if it's good news for 2024, but I think one of the things I like about the community that we exist in is how it comes together and supports each other. And I think there's not many other communities like this, and that it doesn't matter what the challenge, it doesn't matter the hurdle. We might not be perfect and we're still grappling with doing the basics right 10 years later, but actually the number of initiatives where I see people encouraging others, mentoring, bringing people in and giving them scholarships to come to conferences to learn from the best. And I think we're only going to see more of that effort in 2024 to bring our community on, to accelerate the learning of others, bring the early stage career talent in and through. And for me, it might sound cheesy, but I think that's one of the positive things about being involved in this community is seeing how we support each other. And I think that's only going to continue in 2024, or at least I hope it does.
Love it. Love it. Laura.
You know what? We haven't talked about cloud at all. What happened? I mean, so I think my positive for 2024, every startup I'm working with pretty much at this point, and I'm seeing this more and more with digital transformation, they're taking advantages of services that are starting to decouple the layers. So when they're building their applications, they're making use of services that are provided to them as is. And so the underlying infrastructures can be maintained at appropriate secure levels by the providers of those services. And the applications are no longer the lynch to like the sticking point to being able to keep the underlying infrastructure secure. And then not only that, but the networks that are being used for day-to-day activities like email and browsing the internet, where we know like that's a huge entry point for risk, are completely decoupled now from where the services are being run. And yes, there are limited gateway opportunities between them, but they're limited. They're not on big open networks anymore where everybody's just doing whatever. So I'm optimistic in 2024 that continues on, and we're seeing more of that happening. And the service providers are continuing to push that as well, to make that decoupling of the application layer and the services that people use from what we need to do to secure it.
Very cool. And Kat, some good news, please.
I mean, I can tell you that MITRE's got like interest in all these, and it's like working on open source projects for this stuff. That's about like exciting as it gets, right? But I would say as far as trends go, I'm gonna like 3rd or 14th, what everyone else has said regarding the community. The really nice thing about this, like the cybersecurity community today, is that we were kind of like, when our field started, we were the IT guys that had a hobby. And like now we're a full-on field with different, like with an actual like a CISO role. And we're realizing the CISO role is too much for one person. So then we're creating other teams underneath them. And then even identity and access management, like they're starting to actually break out into like true problem sets. And I definitely see the evolution of that continuing, where we start to get even more granular with how we need to be able to like have open source projects in review. But I would also say, I think that's one reason why we always go towards open source projects, because that's the non-biased one, right? Like it's the company that doesn't have a stake in it, because you're just giving back to the community. Here's a tool for you to be able to figure out, like if you have anything in your code, and it's like everyone just uses it. And I love that part of our community, because it's usually security professionals that are writing these tools and releasing them for free. Like Patrick Royal is a great example. His tools on Mac OS do better than, I can't officially say that actually. So we'll just say they do a really great job compared to what I've seen in the market today. And it's free, and then you see other nonprofits spinning up to be able to bring people into our field in this very welcoming and warm way, where we're helping them develop real world skills and not expecting them to necessarily pipe into our company. We're just doing it because we want to lift them up and raise the tide. So I love that that's where our community has not only been, but they're also continuing to grow and expand in.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And we see that in the likes of Sector and Black Hat with the arsenal, where tools are developed and presented not for commercial purposes, right? They're there to help learn and educate and actually be used. So I think now we're left with 2 good news stories, one from the cockroach, one from the rat. Who do you want to hear from first? Let's go. Which one do you want to be, Mark? I'll put it there.
Oh, they both sound really appealing and yummy. So I don't know. You give me one.
I'll label you as the cockroach, and I'll be the New York rat. How's that?
Is that cockroaches play the blues and the jazz?
Yes,
okay, I can be that.
Do that.
No, I don't know. I mean, I made the joke before, because it's hard to talk about cybersecurity and be all positive and jolly. And I'm thinking I'm going to go on ChatGPT maybe and ask him to write some kind of like a carol for the cybersecurity community. We'll see what it comes out with. But it's the job of the community. And I agree with all of you. I'm going to bring the community. It came a long way from when I started to go at RSA and Black Hat many years ago. Not as many as you guys probably, or Sean for sure. But my hope and I think my prediction is that now that the community is strong, with AI, everybody talking about it, the European community just come out with the AI Act, and people are listening at these stories. So I hope it's going to start bleeding into educating really the users. And by the users, I talk about the business people, the people on the board. And it's not just that shaman community of we have the knowledge and you have to listen to us, but we're all collaborating outside the community as well. So a larger community maybe, and I think it's impossible not to go there because everybody's talking about it. So that's the cockroach good news.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Roach. And so for me, I'm going to be a little selfish because this thing keeps going around in my mind that we have an opportunity to create business better. And I think there's a voice in the community that, I don't know, I haven't seen or heard much of it. And to me, it's the security architect. And some of you may have seen me post about this. But I think we have an opportunity, and I think it will happen in 24. And I'm going to do my darndest to make sure that happens, that the security architect has a voice for how we actually build business from the start and select the cloud and the data center and the infrastructure and the containers and build apps and all that stuff in a way that actually makes business safe from the start. So that's my positive news, that I think some of that starts to happen, and we uncover some good stories where businesses are more resilient from the get-go. And I think from a tech perspective, I think platform engineering will be a big part of that. So another prediction is I think we'll see an uptick in platform engineering in 24, where we find some of these best practices and technologies and open source, and they come together in a way that it gives us a nice foundation to work from instead of a chaotic piece of crap that we have today. So anyway, that's my positive news as a rat.
The positive news is that we have an hour and 10 minutes of really good open conversation. We're lucky as ITSP Magazine and Sean, your podcast about cybersecurity, to have so many friends again in the community. I have an opportunity to have this conversation, reach a lot of people out there. Hopefully they enjoy, and they will have some thoughts that they can leave in the comments wherever they're watching or listening to this. And we're ready for more of this. I will have one, I think, if I can put it together, on generative AI and society. So if some of you want to join me on that side, you can be negative there too if you want.
Join the roach in the society.
Well, always great to see everybody.
It is. I'm super grateful for everybody taking the time to participate and have a good old chat. And as we said at the beginning, get people to think, right? So thanks everybody for listening, for watching. If you had the opportunity to see Mr. Roach and Mr. Rat in action, and all of our friends.
Now we're gonna leave this.
Be sure to share, subscribe, and think and participate. If you have an idea you want to talk about, let us know. Kat, Yolanda, George, Laura, Rob, Matthew, Chuck, Marco, I guess myself as well. Thank you all. See you.
Thanks, R&R.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Pleasure. Take care.
Take care.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Redefining Security Podcast. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share ITSPmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.